Hey everybody, Big Anklevich here, podcaster, author, and toy enthusiast. Last time we talked about the history of the Marvel Comics characters Cloak and Dagger. If you missed that video, then click on the link that's appearing above my head right now and check it out. I'm going to proceed as though you saw it, so if you haven't, you might feel a little lost at times. I'm just saying. Okay, so Cloak and Dagger's TV show premiered over on the Freeform TV channel just a few weeks ago. And I also recently managed to grab the Marvel Legends figures of Cloak and Dagger. So now seemed like the perfect time to do a whole series of shows about them. Today, in part 2 of 3, I'm going to talk about season 1 of their show. And then next week, we'll get into the action figures. Let's check it out here on Big Anklevich on Toys.
Cloak and Dagger.
Last week I talked about Cloak and Dagger and how they never quite caught on as characters that you could center a comic book around. Throughout their tenure with Marvel Comics, they were always peripheral characters. But for some reason, when Disney bought Marvel and created Marvel Television to produce shows about their characters, Cloak and Dagger was one of the first shows to go into the planning stages. At San Diego Comic-Con in 2011, Jeff Loeb announced that the show was in development at ABC Family, but it must have been stuck in some sort of development hell because it wasn't until 2016 when they finally went forward with it. ABC Family wasn't even ABC Family anymore by this time. They had rebranded as Freeform. Maybe no one believed in the show because of the third-tier nature of the characters, and it wasn't until Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had 3 seasons, Agent Carter had 2 seasons, Daredevil had 2 seasons, and Jessica Jones had its first season that they finally realized that third-tier characters might be able to carry a TV show after all, in this day and age of unadulterated love for Marvel properties. So they cast Aubrey Joseph as Cloak and Olivia Holt as Dagger and set to work putting together a TV show about these characters. The first big decision that they made was to relocate the story from New York City to New Orleans.
Me personally,
I've got nothing against that. I've heard plenty of people talk about how great it is that Marvel set their comic books in the real New York City instead of a make-believe city like Metropolis or Gotham City, because it grounded their stories in the real world and made it easier for people to relate. And that's cool and all, but despite what New Yorkers might think, there's actually people living outside of New York City too. Does every superhero have to patrol New York? I mean, how much crime can there be there after there are 100 superheroes busting up the criminal enterprises there? I mean, Spider-Man would be reduced to sitting on the street watching for jaywalkers and then the whip yanking them back out of the street. There's a crosswalk at the corner, please use it. Wouldn't it be better if we put heroes around the country and the world? In the MCU, they've been a little better than in the comics. Iron Man was in LA. Sometimes. Ant-Man in San Francisco. And DC put the movie Shazam in Philadelphia, even though he normally patrols Fawcett City in the comics. I mean, I grew up in Sacramento, California, a nice place that has little to hang its hat on when it comes to national notoriety. If we had a superhero patrolling our streets, even if it was a lesser-known one, like, I don't know, The Sentry or Iron Lad or Beak or something,
He's strong enough to move a mountain, you're pretty weak. Seriously, what do you bitch?
then we'd all be super fans. There would at least be one place in the world where The Sentry sold better than any other comic book. They're doing a little more of that recently. There's the West Coast Avengers and the Great Lakes Avengers and so on. It's just too bad they didn't start off like that. So I really like the fact that they moved Cloak and Dagger to New Orleans. The show's writers worked in many of the interesting and unique characteristics of the location. From its well-known voodoo culture to its bayous and swamps to its energy-centric economy to its love for the celebrations of Mardi Gras and more. Some things are better than others, but the location is a definite plus. It makes the show much more exotic than it would be as just another New York superhero show. The show isn't really a superhero show, though. It's a teen drama that happens to include superheroes. But it's not among the best of those. It's partway through its second season, but even if it manages to eke out 6 seasons in a movie, I don't think it'll be remembered among the ranks of Beverly Hills 90210 and Dawson's Creek. I'd say that its biggest problem is that it's failed to make characters that you can really care about. Aubrey Joseph, who plays Cloak, is pretty wooden and monotone. Most of his lines are delivered as if he's bored or half asleep. And his character is mostly as boring as the delivery of his lines. He's whiny and stereotypically angry with his parents, though never for any good reason. They give him a girlfriend, but the two have little chemistry with each other, and their relationship has little charm or spice. He has no other friends beside this girlfriend either. It's like he just moved to town this week or something. Olivia Holt is not as dull in her portrayal, but they make her character extra unlikable to make up for that. The first thing we see her do is seduce a guy, then drug him and steal all the valuables from his home. Then she goes home and snorts some crushed prescription drug opioids she got off her quarry. What a lovely person for me to root for. They try to tell us that her fatal fault that she has to overcome is that she runs away from all her problems. Several characters specifically point it out. But it's far from her biggest problem. I know they probably thought they were going for a character arc, but they never had her specifically tackle these demons and triumph over them. Instead, she just got too busy saving the city to bother snorting oxy or slipping roofies to rich horn dogs for a while. The characters being so unlikable is the biggest fatal flaw of the show. If I don't care whether my heroes win or lose, I'm not going to stick around and keep watching. The other big problem is that nothing actually happens from episode to episode. It's a common problem in this age of binging on Netflix, or Hulu in this particular case. There's 10 episodes in the first season, but only enough plot for, about 5 or 6 tops. Probably less than that. More like a 2-hour movie, if you ask me. The show pads its running time by relying heavily on dream sequences, or actually visions, for its storytelling. And I don't know if you love that kind of stuff, but I don't. I find it very annoying. Let's skip the abstract representation of people's hopes and fears and have actual things happen instead. The visions all have this goofy shot on a soundstage with a smoke machine pumping out fog feel to them too. I think they thought they were getting something surrealistic, but it just looks chintzy to me.
Me personally.
Now that I think about it, I wonder if the power to see someone's hopes or fears is a power from the comics, or if it was just invented for the TV show. Because I don't remember ever having seen it in anything that I read with Cloak and Dagger, though I in no way claim to have exhaustively read all of their appearances. They did use it well one time when Dagger didn't trust someone. She touched him to see what his hopes were, and when she found them to be good and noble, she changed her tune about him and started trying to help him. That was cool. In the show, Cloak and Dagger are no longer runaways, though Tandy lives most of the time in an old abandoned church and only visits her mother on occasion. Maybe they scrapped that part of their comic origin because the Marvel property called The Runaways was hitting TV right at the same time that Cloak and Dagger was, and they didn't want them to seem too similar. Despite being effectively homeless, though, Dagger is still able to take showers somewhere, make herself food somehow, and has a cell phone that she keeps charged somehow, too. Her clothes are always nice, and she always looks beautiful with great hair and makeup. She does have a mom that lives in a trailer that she sometimes visits, but they make it clear that she visits seldom, and the visits are short and clandestine. So that can't be what's going on. I guess homelessness must just be a lot nicer than I was led to believe all my life. Why do I keep wasting all this money on my house payment when I can live so well homeless? Oh, right. I guess I need a place to keep my toy collection.
The things you own end up owning you.
Their origin story has changed completely. It's much more akin to the Captain Marvel movie than to their own comic book origin. The two are both involved in tragedies that put them in the water near the Roxxon oil drilling platform when it blows, sending out a pulse of energy that changes them into Cloak and Dagger. Not sure why they changed the origin, although it worked well with the show's story. Cloak and Dagger's comic book origin was intertwined with their superhero mission, and their show origin was the same. They spent the entire season trying to unravel the mystery of the explosion at the drilling platform. To finish up, I'll just list off a few things that I liked and disliked, and we'll call it a day. Number 1, Cloak's older brother is the one who gets shot in the show instead of his best friend like in the comics. They named his brother Billy, which was also the name of his friend in the comics. That was a nice touch. Number 2, Detective Bridget O'Reilly is in the show. She was a big part of their story in the comics, and though she was mostly pretty boring like everyone else in the show, they had a plan for her, and her story is supposed to be a big part of the second season. Number 3, Detective O'Reilly has moved to New Orleans from New York, and when she hears about Cloak and Dagger's superpowers, she says that she knew Misty Knight in New York and was familiar with Luke Cage, the hero of Harlem. So this superhero stuff doesn't faze her. It's a pretty tenuous connection to the MCU, but at least they gave us some sort of connection. It's a longtime gripe of mine and probably Marvel's biggest failure in the MCU. They've really blown it in connecting all the TV shows to the movies. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s best moments came from the episodes that were tied in with the Captain America Winter Soldier movie. The show was never better than during that era. But that's the most any of the Marvel TV shows has ever tried to actually be part of the MCU, aside from throwaway lines like this one. I hope that maybe the new Disney Plus thing will fix that issue. Guess we'll see. Number 4, somewhere around episode 4, they started wrapping each show around some type of framing device. If I remember correctly, it started with these shots they did of a statue being 3D printed by the voodoo lady. You got a shot each time you came back from commercial break. Then, at the end of the show, we saw that it was a statue of Cloak, or at least a representation of Cloak. That was fine and all, but then they did it more and more with each show. Cloak and Dagger are having a conversation at the start of the next episode, and they give us a piece of it after each commercial break. Then we drop out to see the actual happenings of the show, and then we come back to it. Later, it's the voodoo lady telling the story of the various divine pairings over the years, and how they saved the city. Then it's a school teacher talking about elements of myths which coincidentally apply directly to what is happening in the show. It grew tedious and took a lot of the fun out of watching the show, especially the teacher one where he tells you exactly what is happening and why, instead of, letting us watch it and discover it for ourselves. Number 5, lastly, the costumes. Dagger never had anything that you could call a costume, and I bet they will never give her anything like her classic comics costume. If they ever give her any kind of costume, I'm sure it'll be more like the recent one from this comic book from 2018, which is fine with me. I just hope they eventually give her one. They did try to do the costume for Cloak, however. For most of the show, they just kept alluding to it with a bunch of different things. When he was a kid, they put him in his brother's big black hoodie. Later, he teleports away with his bed sheet, his black bed sheet, and you see him walk on the rooftop of the building with the sheet billowing in the breeze. I liked that. Eventually, they progressed to this goofy striped cloak that used to belong to his dead older brother. It was his Mardi Gras costume. I think they were trying to honor the comic book somehow, but I'm pretty sure they don't understand what the purple stripes on Cloak's cloak are. His cloak is pure black, but it ripples. The purple stripes are the highlights on the ripples. It's how they demonstrate shape on something that's pure black in comics. Like Spider-Man's suit here, it doesn't have weird blue piping around the edges, that's highlights. Here's a pic of Cloak from more recent years. They go with gray for the highlights, so you can see the ripples. I guess the showrunners just didn't get it. And sadly, it does make Cloak look a little silly. They do earn a few consolation points for working it into the New Orleans setting, though. So, in the end, if you love everything that Marvel does, or maybe you're an MCU completist and you don't feel right if you haven't seen every last second of the MCU, then watch the show. Though, I'm sure you probably already have. If you're like me, however, with limited free time to devote to the many, many, many entertainment options that we have these days, then I'd probably skip it. The best that I can say about it is that it's mediocre. Even my daughter, who is a teenager and thinks that she's going to live forever and has all the time in the world to spare, gave up on it. She watched the first season, tried to watch the second, but just couldn't do it, and she quit. It definitely could be a lot better, and it may possibly get there, too. I'm a fan of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it's been pretty hit and miss over the years. Who's to say that Cloak and Dagger won't hit its stride and become one of the best shows Marvel has to offer? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed yourself and found the video to be useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up down there below. And also, I'd love it if you subscribe to the show if you're not already. It would be really awesome. Also, check out my podcast. It's called the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine. We do short stories in audio format that you can enjoy on your commute or while you're doing chores or something like that. We also talk about movies, TV, and a bunch of other things on our other episodes that are called That Gets My Goat. We're talking about Avengers Endgame right now. And lastly, leave a comment if you have anything to say. What was your impression of Cloak and Dagger? Did you agree with my assessment of the show? Or do you think I'm a total idiot and the show was a friggin' masterpiece? What did you dislike or like about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And thanks for watching. See you next time.